Hi, and welcome to another video by Get It Done Home Repairs. Today we're going to talk about how to join pieces of sheetrock together. There's different ways of doing it, so let me just bring you in there and explain how you should put them together so that you have a nice perfect joint. All right, you're going to need a couple of things. One, you're going to need some spackle. I would recommend getting a non-shrinking spackle because there's nothing worse than spackle in the job, getting it done, sanding it down, only to find out that a month down the road the spackle has shrunk a little bit and now you can see the joint fairly clearly. You don't want that. So spend a little bit extra, get a good spackle that's non-shrinking, and you'll be in good shape. You're going to need some tape to actually join them together. They have different kinds. This is the one that I use. This has little holes through it that the spackle goes through. I do like this one, but there is one made of paper too. I use the paper one sometimes as well, but that's personal preference. But this you can get in the big box stores as well. You're going to need a couple of different maybe spackling type tools to do the spackling on here, because when you put it on there you'll be able to smooth it out nice and smoothly. So you will need an assortment of different tools like that. Of course you're going to need something to cut that tape that goes on there, and like I said, that non-shrinking spackle. All right, so enough talking, let's get in here and I'm going to show you how to get this job so that it's absolutely perfect where you don't have to worry about doing anything. All right, so all right, let's get started. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do before we do anything is we're going to take our tape that we're going to use and we're going to put it across the project where we're going to put it, and we're going to stretch it across here and we're going to cut it to size. I do want to mention this to you as well. They do have tape that's actually this type of tape, which is actually sticky, that you could put it on there where it just sticks right on, and then you put the spackle over the top of it. But this is the one that I happen to use. All right, so now we're going to take some spackle and we're going to spread the spackle on this joint right in here. Let me just show you one thing real quick so you have an idea of how you have to put this together. Sheetrock has different thicknesses to it. This part right here is actually tapered down just a little bit thinner than the rest of the sheetrock. This part of the sheetrock here is fairly thick, and if you were to put the two pieces together, you'd have two different sizes. So let me give you an example of what I mean. I'll bring you in there and show you. I don't know if you can see it, but this part of the sheetrock here is actually thinner here. There's a little groove right here where you can feel there's a little bump right in here that's actually, it's a little bit thinner here where it actually comes together. Now this part over here, as you can tell, it's not. Let me grab another piece and I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so if you were to put the sheetrock, there's different, like this side over here, this obviously I did cut it, but this part of the sheetrock is thicker than this part of the sheetrock. This part of the sheetrock here is actually thinner. Let me grab a piece and I'll put it up here. I'll show you what I mean. Okay, see what I mean? This one, even it's not really a big difference. It's probably a 64th of an inch, but you want to make sure that you put the part here together, or if you're not doing it like this, then make sure you have these pieces together. But make sure you put the sheetrock together correctly. So make sure you put the sheetrock together correctly in here. Now, if you don't, and you were to join these two together, it would be okay as well, because these are both the same thickness right here, as you can see. All right, so make sure you put the sheetrock together before you start your project. Okay, so the first thing you do is you take some spackle. Make sure you mix your spackle up too, so that it's not all dried out. You would take your spackle just like this, put it on here, just like this. Make sure it gets into the joint there, just like that. Okay, now next thing you'll do is you'll take your tape that you're going to put on there, and you take your tape and you just put it across the joint itself, just like that. And then you would just smooth it out here. Now the key with spackle is now we're going to have to let this dry until it's thoroughly dry, but you want to make sure you don't want to leave a lot of bumps. You don't want to leave something like that on there. If you leave something like that on there and it dries, you're going to have a considerable amount of sanding that you need to do. So you want to come in and you want to smooth everything out so it's fairly smooth, just like that. Now, once you're smooth and you feel confident that this is okay, you'll let this dry. Once you have this on here and you feel that it's fairly smooth now and you're not going to have to worry about it, we're going to let this dry. Once this thoroughly dries out, we're going to come back and we're going to sand this down very lightly and we'll put our finish coat on. But remember, the key to this is that you need to make sure that you get all of the excess spackle off of there. You don't want to leave it all bumpy all over the place because it makes it a lot harder to sand the spackle later on. All right, so let's let this dry out a little bit. Once it's dry, we're going to come back, we're going to sand it, and then we're going to finish it off. All right, so now that our spackle has dried overnight, it's now the next day. It's nice and dry, thoroughly through and through. It's all dried up, okay? Now we're going to come in here with some sandpaper. We're going to just sand it very lightly to take off any of the bumps or any of the irregularities. And then we're going to put our final coat of spackle on. Then it'll dry overnight again. And then once it dries overnight, tomorrow we'll come in, we'll finish that joint, and we'll be good to go. All right, there's different kinds of paper that you're going to need to use to get the area where you're working nice and clean. You're going to need something like a sanding block like this, or you can use something that's a little bit bigger like this to get it nice and straight along the bottom. Now this is actually, it's a mesh that you can buy in the big box stores that you can sand the area that you're working with. Or what I like to do is I do like to come in here with some sandpaper. You can buy it in sheets like this and cut it to the length that you need so that it fits into the sanding block. Or you can just buy the sandpaper this way and it's meant to fit perfectly into the sanding block itself. Either way is perfectly fine. I like to do it this way because you can get a lot more for your money, and you have a lot more sandpaper for the same cost as you would if you bought this sandpaper. All right, now when you want to sand it, you want to sand the spackle joint with a very rough sandpaper first to take off the rough area, and then you would use a very fine paper to do it after that to make it nice and smooth. The one that I like to use either a 60 or an 80 grit. This one is a 60 grit. It's a much rougher sandpaper. This one is an 80 grit, which is a little bit less rough. And then the final sanding that I do is something like this. It's about a 150 or a 100 grit paper, and it'll make it nice and smooth. All right, so enough talking. Let me get in here. I'm going to show you how each one of these pieces work here, and then we're going to get it done. Now, I'm going to tell you this. Usually what I do is I have multiple sanding blocks. I'll put this one into the one sanding block, and then I'll have my finish very fine sandpaper in the other one, so I'm not changing, from one paper over to the other. All right, so all right, let's turn this, get this stuff out of the way, and let's sand this and get this job done. Okay, so now that we're going to sand it, we're going to come in here with our coarse paper first. Like I said, we're going to use the heavier paper first. We're going to use the 80 grit first, and you just come in here and you just go across it just like this to take off any of the rough areas that you're going to be working with. And you use your hand to feel where you need to sand. And now we're going to grab the spackle and we're going to put a second coat on. Okay, so now we take our spackle and just put it onto the project. Okay, so now that you have your spackle is still wet, of course, but tomorrow this will be nice and dry. Then we'll come in here with our either 100 grit or our 150, and then we'll clean this up in here so it'll be nice and smooth. Initially, when you're doing it tomorrow, you would come in with your heavy 80 grit to take off like you see these little bumps here. You'll take off all of those bumps right there, and then once you have all of those bumps off, you'll come in with your finished sandpaper, and you'll come in and you sand it off, and it'll be nice and straight. Again, when you sand, you don't want to go side to side like this. You want to go with a little bit of an angle like this, and that way the joint, it'll be nice and straight, and it won't be real bumpy. But just make sure you feather it in on the edges right here so that it blends in. Use your hand to feel all of the bumpy areas, and once you feel it and there's no more bumps, that's it, the job is done. All right, so that's how you would join two pieces of sheetrock together, or if you're replacing a section of sheetrock, that's how you would do it. All right, as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.